Hi, I'm Claire, and this is a new reading wrap-up. Today I'm going to talk about 5 more books that I've read recently. These are books that I actually read in March and at the start of April, so recent is, but it's fine because time has lost all meaning these days. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about Heartstopper Volume 4 by Elise Oseman. This is a graphic novel series about 2 boys called Nick and Charlie who go to high school in the UK and embark on a relationship together. They are already dating at this point and they are out to their families, but no one in school knows that they're dating. Charlie was outed as gay against his will before the story even started in volume 1, and he is still very much dealing with the trauma of that. And in the first 3 volumes, Nick has come to realize that he is bisexual and he's kind of dealing with that as well. He's out to his mum, but not to his dad. This whole volume takes place over a school trip that the class is taking to Paris alongside another class from the girls' school next door. So we've got the whole group, Charlie and Nick and all of their friends from both the boys and girls schools. So as well as Nick and Charlie and their relationship, we get to also see a lot of other cute couples and romance going on with secondary characters, which is very, very nice. Aside from the fun class trip hijinks, the story in this is mostly about Nick and Charlie figuring out how they want to announce to their friends and the school that they are going out. If I remember correctly, they've already decided that they want to tell people. They don't know how, though. They are kind of struggling with that. And for Charlie, it's bringing back a lot of memories and a lot of the trauma of being outed against his will, like I said before the story even starts. One of the ways that this anxiety manifests for Charlie is through disordered eating, so definitely a content warning there for eating disorder. Bear that in mind if it might bother you to read that, but it is one of the things that we've kind of seen peaks of in the previous books, and in this it starts really coming to the fore. And then on Nick's side, of course, he is worried about telling the whole school that they are dating, but he is also concerned about coming out to his dad, who lives in France. And of course, he is also noticing that Charlie isn't doing very well, and he is trying to help with that. So that's kind of what's going on in this volume. I read this so quickly. I was at the library picking up some other books when the library was still open, saw this on a shelf. I figured, I have a little bit of time. It's so short. I just sat down and read it. Didn't even take it out because I thought, if I take it out, I'll have it for days and days and days when it's going to take me such a short amount of time to read. So I did that, and it was lovely. I enjoy this series, but I don't know if I would necessarily buy the books if my library didn't have them, because this is a story that I enjoy reading, but I don't feel like a burning need to know what happens and, to own the book, I guess, because it's not really, it's not for me. I enjoy it, but I'm not the person who will need it the most and love it the most and benefit from it the most. So that makes sense to me. As I was talking about how I wouldn't necessarily buy copies of this, I just remembered that I believe this is a webcomic. I think you might be able to read it for free online, so I'll definitely be checking on that to see if I completely made that up in my head, and if not, I'll try to remember to link it in the description box below. I gave this 3.5 stars. Like I said, it's really enjoyable, but I am not feeling a massive urge to get more and more and more of it into my eyeballs. I think it's really good at what it's trying to do. I just think maybe I would have loved it a lot more if I've read it when I was younger and closer to the age of the characters. Maybe. I will say though that the art style is really, really cute as well. Next up, we've got the only book that actually managed to sustain my attention in March. I started a number of things in March, but the one that I really, really adored was The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. This was a 5 stars read for me. I absolutely loved this. I was really anticipating it, and it did not disappoint. This is the story of Kosorwe, a young orc girl who is brought up in this death cult as a bride of the death god. So she's grown up all her life knowing that at the age of 14, she would become a sacrifice for the Unspoken. She would march to her death in the crypt of the Unspoken. She would go in and not come out, and that's just how it has to be. Except that a few days before Kosorwe is due to make her sacrifice, a strange wizard turns up at the convent where she lives, looking for information about a mysterious artifact, reliquary type thing. And when Kosorwe walks into the crypt to make her sacrifice, of course, our strange, shady wizard is there to be like, hey, you know, you don't need to die. Like, you could just come with me and live and work for me, and you don't need to die. And of course, she decides to live and go with the wizard, because otherwise the book would be very short. And then it's all about like her kind of learning to be a person who is not the bride of the Unspoken, who is not a sacrifice in waiting, and like who she is as a person. And we get to see more of her relationship with this wizard, Balthandros Thathanai, who is definitely shady. Like, you get to see straight away that he is power hungry. And of course he does save Kosorwe from giving herself up as sacrifice to the Unspoken. But like, also he does that so that he can hire her as a sellsword and like train her to be a mercenary for him. So, you know, definitely shady. But I did really, really love the way the book went, where like part of it is like a bit of a almost training montage in book form, where Kosorwe is discovering who she is as a person. And then as the story progresses, we get to meet more and more characters. And I have to say, I really, really, really love the characters in this book. They're not all good people, but they're also entertaining. And like, you understand why they do the things that they do. And like, they're just so fun to read. Like I said, Balthandros is a very shady wizard. Like, you can see he's power hungry. You can see that maybe if he does get the reliquary, it wouldn't be like the best thing in the world, but he's so fun. And then we've got another character called Tal, who is like just so grumpy all the time and irritable, and he's got this like really wonderful rivalry going on with Kosorwe, where they are just always trying to one-up each other to impress Balthandros. There's also really amazing world building and mythology in this book. The whole world that this is set in is like this web or maze of interconnected like universes, planets, I guess. They travel between worlds through this place called the maze using ships that like kind of feel like sail ships, but I couldn't tell you for sure that they weren't spaceships. There is so much that is just mentioned in this book that could be explored so much more in future books. I definitely thought that this book was a standalone because it concludes in a very satisfying way. Of course, I wanted more of the world and more of the characters because they were great, but I just kind of thought like, you know, it's one of those situations where you'd like more, but you respect the fact that the author has like one story to tell and they've told it. But no, I went on Goodreads and realized that this is actually the first in a series. There's gonna be more. I'm so jazzed. I'm so happy there's gonna be more. I can't wait to see more of those amazing characters. Like, just so excited for more of this. It was a 5-star, can you tell? You can, because I already said it earlier. Speaking of 5 stars, next I read a memory called Empire by R.K.D. Martin, a book that I had been looking forward to and anticipating for a super long time. When the synopsis for this started making the rounds way before it was published, I was really excited because it sounded like it had like real strong Anne Leckie Imperial Ratch vibes, and I love those books. That's the series starting with Ancillary Justice. We follow Mahit Desmar, the brand new ambassador from a fiercely independent mining station who's just been sent to take a post in the imperial capital of Tixkolan. This is highly unusual because there was already an ambassador from the station in Tixkolan. It's just that they haven't heard from him in a while, and then Tixkolan asks for a new ambassador. So one of the things Mahit is tasked to do by her people is to figure out what happened to the previous ambassador. Unfortunately, when she arrives, she finds out very quickly that he's dead, and she has to figure out whether he was murdered, which is very likely, and who done it, and whether they are going to in turn be looking to murder her. One thing that is very specific to the mining station that Mahit comes from that is not true of Tixkalan is that on this mining station they've got a system of institutionalized memory being passed down. They have this piece of technology called an imago that people can have implanted in their brain when they take high positions of power that will record their thoughts and memories, and then when they die, this imago can be passed to the next person to have their post so that the imago line of memory can be maintained. This is because on a small mining station out in space, losing memory and knowledge is really dangerous, so knowledge and memory must be preserved, and the way knowledge and memory is preserved is by having these like almost mechanical ghosts of the person who did your job before you implanted in your head to like let you know if you're about to do something real dangerous so that you can, not die in space. So of course it is absolutely fascinating to be reading about. Mahit starts the book with an imago copy of the previous ambassador to Tixkalan, the person she's been sent to replace. She has an imago of him, but it's a really old imago imprint. It was taken 4 years after he started being ambassador, and now he's been ambassador for like 20 years. So Mahit, who really, really needs information in order to survive and thrive in the imperial capital, is left with this really out-of-date memory bank and knowledge bank, and that is something that is really unusual for someone from her station. She is really kind of struggling with that, and then worse yet, when she actually arrives on Tixkalan in the imperial capital, her imago starts malfunctioning, so she doesn't even have that out-of-date link anymore. She's all on her own, and it is so weird for her as a cultural concept to be on her own. She's not only in a foreign city, she is in a foreign city that is like at the heart of this imperial force that is kind of taking over more and more and more bits of the galaxy. And of course she comes from an independent station, but they are not fools to think that they'll be independent forever without a fight. They do know that Tixkalan might one day turn its eyes to them, and they want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So there's a lot of really fascinating political intrigue in this. There's also a lot about memory and personhood and like what it is like to be a person with like a backup memory bank of somebody else, and the misunderstandings between Mahit, who's grown up with that as like a cultural expectation of a thing that's completely normal to happen, and then the people on Tixkalan who know about it and are like just appalled by the mere concept, that they find it just completely awful. There's also a lot of really interesting language stuff going on there with how it is that Tixkalan uses its language to like do more imperialism. Basically, like the word for the capital city of Tixkalan is the same as the word for world in their language. So if you are just showing up to Tixkalan as a tourist from outside of the empire, you might have somebody who's like, oh, have you visited the world before? And, obviously it could be the city, but it's the same word. So it is kind of like quite jarring, I guess, to read that and to have that as an idea. There's also a whole thing about how the word for Tixkalanli citizen is the same as the word for person. So like there is the connotation in their language that if you're not from Tixkalan, you're not really a person, which like, yeah, that kind of tracks with a lot of like awful things that various imperialist regimes have done across the years. If you look at like Imperial France or Imperial Britain, like some of the ways, anyway, this was so interesting and crunchy. I've only just mentioned like the world building stuff that I really, really loved in this. Like the plot was also good. I really enjoyed the plot. I really enjoyed the characters and the relationships between them. But there's already so much that I already talked about that I loved in the world building. I'm gonna wrap it up. This is obviously a 5-star read for me. There is a sequel to this coming out next year in 2021, A Desolation Called Peace, a very chilling title. I very much enjoyed the ending of this, by the way. It wraps up a bunch of things, obviously brings up more questions since there's going to be a sequel. It's hard to say without massive spoilers, I'm trying to be quite vague, but I just really enjoyed the way this wrapped up and can't wait for more. Next up, we unfortunately have a book that I didn't enjoy quite as much, and that is This Is How You Lose a Time War by Amal Motar and Max Gladstone. This is a finalist for the BookTube SFF Awards and also the Hugo Awards this year. I know that a lot of people really love this book, and honestly, it had the makings of something that I also would really love. This is a romance, a love story between two women who are spies on opposite sides of a time war, which certainly is something that sounds like my cup of tea. They are also like writing letters and notes and messages to each other, so it's partly epistolary, which I enjoy. It's just that the way it was executed was not like my favorite thing. I'm not saying it's badly written. The writing is gorgeous and lyrical and like really on a sentence kind of level. You're looking at it and going like, wow, this is really like beautiful, absolutely. But the focus of the story is very much on the lyricism, on like the beauty and the poetry of the writing and those two characters talking to each other, and not as much on the plot. And honestly, I was just a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see more of the really interesting like time travel things that are set up in this. The time war is between these two factions that are both using time travel to go and change things in history, more or less to their advantage, but honestly, I can't remember like what either side is more or less into than the other. I think I remember one side of this war is like more influenced by nature. Honestly, one of them might be like a dryad who was born from a tree. I don't actually know if that's the case, because a lot of it was fairly kind of vague and weird and was difficult to understand. For me, as I was reading, I kept going like, what is going on? It even feels a little difficult to talk about this book in a way that doesn't feel convoluted and vague and weird, because I don't even know what side to grasp it from, you know? I think this is a prime example of a book that sets out to do a very specific particular thing, and it mostly succeeds at that. But that thing was not what I wanted. I really like time travel as a trope, and that's what I really wanted to revel in. I really wanted to have some timey-wiminess and to like understand how the time travel works. The time travel device in this is so interesting. Time is a braid, and you go up and down the strands of the braid, and then it kind of branches out and stuff changes, and it just seems super interesting. Those characters at some point are having to like live out full lives as the kind of infiltrator spies, but they're not on the same kind of timeline as each other. It's weird. It's so weird. And I wonder how much we're supposed to be confused when we are done with the book. Like how much the book intended to give a comprehensible plot, because my problem with this is that A, I wanted more plot and I wanted more time travel, but B, I'm not sure it's like quite legible or comprehensible for me. I'm not sure what happens to Red and Blue at the end, you know? And I've read a bunch of weird stuff, a bunch of like timey-wimey time travel things. It's not even that there was too steep of a learning curve and it lost me, it's just that it's not focusing on that. It's really just focusing on Red and Blue and the letters they're writing to each other. And again, on the sentence level, those letters are beautiful, but because I felt so unmoored from all of it and I didn't really understand what was going on, I found it difficult to kind of like relate to Red and Blue and really root for them, because it was just like a bit confusing. So this one didn't really work for me. I was kind of disappointed in it. I was hoping to like it a whole lot more than I did. I thought that probably I wouldn't, because I'd heard people talking about how there's not much plot, and I love me some plot, but I only ended up giving it a 3 stars, and even then I gave it a 3 because of the writing being so beautiful at times. I think if the writing hadn't been to the like level that it was, it would have been less than 3 stars. And finally, another book that was a little bit disappointing for me, Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I'm really sorry. I know so many people love this book on BookTube. I wanted to love it. This was in my 5-star predictions. And I didn't adore it, which was a bit of a disappointment. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Again, don't hate me. I really wanted to like it more than I did. I was hoping to get hooked. If you don't know Illuminate, it is a story told with like a bunch of mixed media, which was certainly really fun to read. And it's about these two teenagers, Katie and Ezra, who have escaped the devastation in their home planet, or like mining station. But the two of them are survivors from this completely random attack by a rival company to the one that was running their mining station, and they are now on spaceships, different spaceships, like running away from the mining station where the attack happened. So they have this really long journey ahead of them to call for help. But on top of the ships being damaged and a lot of people having lost their lives in the invasion and the trauma that goes with that, there is also a plague of zombie-like violence going on. Very contagious disease that was caused by the attack that is now spreading through the ships, has to be contained. People start going more and more irritable, and then they start murdering everybody, and it's very scary. And the bits where you see the disease and the like bloodthirsty zombieified people attacking each other, and like you have soldiers going in and trying to like figure out if there's anybody that can be saved, all of that, those were really, really good. But I also read this like, I started it in March and I ended up taking all the way to mid-April to finish it, because wow, I did not realize that the whole thing about there being zombies in this book, which I was looking forward to because I enjoy zombies, would turn out to be a deadly, contagious epidemic disease. It was not the time, and yet. Anyway, I don't actually think that I would have loved this book anymore if I hadn't read it in the middle of a global pandemic. I do think that it made it slower to read for that reason, and maybe if you read it faster, which I think is the way that most people read this book, is like just inhaling it, because it is quite quick to read. It's like 600 pages, but because the mixed media, it goes quite fast. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it quicker, but honestly, my main problem with this was the characters. Ezra and Katie are fine, but I didn't really like get invested in them as people and their relationship. At the beginning of the book, like when the attack happens on their station, they have just broken up, and then through the book they kind of get back together and stuff, and I didn't care massively. There are some moments with secondary characters that I found really, really touching. The thing that is going on with Katie asking for a transfer from ship to ship and being denied. I'm trying to be vague to not give spoilers to this book that literally everybody except for me has read like years ago. But the thing with Katie asking to be transferred over and over again, and the reason why she doesn't get that was really upsetting to me. That was really like a gut punch when I figured out what was going on, you know, a little bit before the book tells you. I thought that really worked, that reveal. But because so much of this book is about Ezra and Katie's relationship, and I didn't actually care about that all that much, it made it difficult to be more invested with the book as a whole. I also didn't really care for the AI character in this. I love an AI character normally, but I just didn't really get along with this one. I don't know why, really, but there's just something about it that like didn't work for me, and I find it difficult to like say why specifically about the AI. Now I'm sounding super down on this book, but I quite enjoyed it and I finished reading it. I wasn't very convinced by the ending reveal, I have to say. When I read a book with like a big reveal at any point in the book, what I want is to feel like if I reread it, I will see little bits of evidence being seeded that I can guess about. And there's definitely a couple of hints in there about who the big bad is and why they're doing the bad thing that they're doing, but it wasn't very much, and it just wasn't very convincing for me. Like I got to the end and the reveal and I was like, huh? What? Just that's why? It didn't really work for me, so I don't think that I'm going to be continuing the series. I just think that as cool as the writing and the mixed media stuff is in this, I don't really need to have more of this. Like I'm happy with the amount of story that I've got and where the characters are at this point, and I don't feel like I need to know more. I'm just fairly disappointed that I didn't like this more than I did, because I thought I would love it and be hooked and want to continue with the rest of the books like so many people have been, but unfortunately it just didn't really work for me. And I'm sorry to wrap up this video on a bit of a bummer, but that is what we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, even if you do think that I am wrong about my opinions about some of these books. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books, if you've enjoyed them, if you agree or disagree with me, if you've got books that you want to recommend to me based on the things that I talked about in this video. And I'll have more reading wrap-up videos for you soon, because I have all of the books that I read during the Owls to do proper in-depth reviews for, so that will be coming very soon. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video on screen right now. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face for a new video from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.